Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dedicated Show. Today, we have a special guest with us. His name is Rob Cowell, and he's the principal technologist at Pyramid Analytics. We're going to talk about how thinking about analytics as storytelling can actually help organizations drive towards a more data literate organization. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items I want to take care of. Engage as much as you'd like. We'll take questions and comments throughout the entire conversation, so no need to save your questions to the end. We're going to take them as they come in. And we are actually giving away 2 AirPods today. Huge thank you to Pyramid Analytics for providing this for the community. I think it's going to be a fun experience. I'm going to show you how that's going to work. We got some hashtag pyramid page here. So if you want to participate in the raffle for a chance to win AirPods as you're joining, all you really have to do is just type in the comments hashtag pyramid on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, or on Twitch, wherever you're joining us from. So we're going to announce one winner maybe around halfway through the session, and then second winner at the end of the session. So I see some of those entries are starting to come in. I appreciate everybody participating. Like I said, feel free to ask questions. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Rob right after I ask you this one question. So as you're joining, like I said, hashtag pyramid, and then please answer this question. Do you think you are data literate? Because that's kind of what we were going to talk about today. So we want to get a sense for, do you feel like if you self-assessed yourself as an individual, would you say that you are data literate? All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring Rob Cowell up on stage. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you here. We've got a lot of hashtag pyramids coming in. So this is exciting stuff. And I'm sure we'll get some responses in terms of whether people think they're data literate or not in the next couple of minutes. But as they do that, it'd be great if you can provide an introduction to yourself and what you do at Pyramid.
Okay, yes. So, well, I suppose you can see my name, Rob Cowell. I'm based in Wales, in the UK. And well, before I got to Pyramid, maybe I should just quickly say where I came from. As I started out working in IT 28 years ago with Lotus Symphony, if anyone remembers that. I don't blame you at all if you don't. And then went on to work with British Telecom in the UK. So working on some of the largest data warehouses in the world, a lot of things like call data records, but very much on the back end of data. Really looking after the sort of the collating and curating of data. I had 5 years with Oracle Corporation, so looking at big data and machine learning and more of the data science side. And then the last 2 years, I've been with Pyramid Analytics in my technologist role. So really what I do here is talk to potential customers and existing customers and look at how we can use the technology that we provide at Pyramid for better understanding and communicating data. So, we're predominantly a BI platform, and so we're looking at taking that data that I used to look after, that I used to curate and bring together from across an organization, and get that to an end user and hopefully provide some actionable insights. So that's a very interesting way to spend the last couple of years and get much closer to the end users. So that's been really good.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And for maybe people who are not familiar with Pyramid Analytics, I know you mentioned it's a BI platform, but maybe talk a little bit more about, how does it stand aside from its competitors, and what is Pyramid Analytics all about?
Yeah, okay. So, at Pyramid, we would describe ourselves as an analytics platform. We're certainly not just a visualization tool. We provide capabilities for collecting and manipulating data, for integrating with data science teams, for training classification models, for example, for building predictive analytics, but then also, of course, and probably predominantly communicating the insight into data across an organization, but allowing the people within organizations to work together. So we really focus a lot around collaboration, around being able to bring human insight on data to be able to share that with your peers and be able to push out the analytic reporting to people when something interesting has happened to them. So a lot of what we want to do is personalize the analytics experience, get more engagement, and really get people taking more more actions for empirical reasons.
Right. That makes sense. And I'm just looking at comments now. So Marie, she feels she is data literate. Asmita, in progress of being data literate. We've got William, data literate. We've got a lot of data literate people here. Scale of 1 to 5, 2.5 data literacy. Okay, very interesting. Martin, I mean, most of the community here are dedicated, right? They're data professionals, but I think it's still going to be a very interesting conversation in terms of how we can use storytelling to promote data literacy. Okay, and then somebody here said that Paul loves symphony, so you've got someone who remembers. Awesome. So we're here to talk about data literacy. I think it's only fair to start out with, what does it mean to be data literate, and who should be data literate?
Yeah, okay. So I mean, maybe even just to twist your very first question ever so slightly already, maybe we even step back and say, what is data literacy, and then so who needs to have that skill. So given that we seem to have quite a wide range of people who are self-assessing their data literacy here, let me just give a quick example of what I think data literacy is, because it will kind of put everything else into context. So really, I see data literacy as the ability to read and be comfortable in understanding data, and probably feel confident that either I can derive my own insights, or at the very least validate the quality of data that's been presented to me. And I think big parts of data literacy that we often don't focus on enough, and I'm certainly going to bring up again here today, are the ability to ask relevant questions of data that is presented to us, and to think critically about that data. So if we ask the question, why is data literacy important? Who should be data literate? I think literally everyone, everywhere, should be data literate. It doesn't matter what organization you work in, or even if you work, data is all around us. We're constantly presented with data, be that on social media, or be that through through the news, newspapers, TV. We're always seeing numbers. In fact, there was I think there was a survey recently that said 87.2% of people are regularly misled by data. I mean, that isn't a survey; I just made that up. But I'm just trying to show the fact, though, that if I kind of state with a little degree of confidence a number, especially if it's got a decimal place in it, you kind of think, well, that sounds reasonable. But really, and hopefully, if anyone hears something like that, you should be immediately thinking, well, hold on, what survey? Where's this number? How was it taken? What was the sample size that was used here? How were the people sampled? And to me, it's that level of kind of critical thinking that I think is the most important part of data literacy, and for the reason that everyone really deals with data where it's valuable to question it. And so everyone should be data literate within the context of the area they work, or with the data that they interact with.
Right. Love it. Thanks, Rob. So there's another comment that's saying that 92.7% of statistics are made up, and I'm more familiar with that one. So when you said that other number, you actually got me. I'm like, wait, really? People, how did they calculate this? But the problem is, I guess people don't really question these numbers, especially when they see a number out there, either on social media or a lot of times in the news as well. They kind of take it for what it is. And so my next question to you is, how do I, as an individual, know that I am data literate or I'm not data literate, or where I am in that journey?
So I mean, I think, again, I'm not. I personally don't think that's necessarily anyone should be able to give a binary answer. And it was interesting. I think you asked, when you asked at the start, I think the way you phrased it was, are you data literate? And yeah, I think very few people said yes or no. People generally introduced a scale for us and said, between 1 and 5, I'm a 2.5. Or so people, even everyone we're asking here, I think, is generally not thinking it's a yes or no. And maybe what we should be thinking of is, do I meet the minimum standards of data literacy required, again, for the data that I have to work with. So different people performing different roles in their organization with different data are going to need to exhibit different different levels of data literacy. So I think, maybe if someone's trying to understand, are they data literate or not, I think a lot of it is down to confidence. If I'm confident that I could explain data from my domain, my department or my organization or my company, can I explain the data that is important to my group, my area, and could I explain something about the data and offer you some insight? If I'm confident I can do that, I think you're probably data literate, because you should, to get that confidence, hopefully, you can question the data a little bit, you understand where it comes from, you know roughly what sort of quality that data is, what the latency of that data is, how frequently is the data that I'm working on updated, has the data been sampled, what sampling mechanism did we use? If you can answer those kind of questions about the data, I think generally you're data literate. And you'll know if you're not data literate because you're being asked questions that you're unable to produce the answers for, despite having easy access to the data. So there's other aspects, I think, that stop you being data literate, not just skills and questioning ability, but if the data is available and you can't give the business the numbers that it wants, then okay, maybe you can start to self-assess and understand the technical areas where you maybe need to uplift a little bit more in.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there a couple questions came in, but first I want to address Kevin. He gets it. 85% of all statistics are made up on the fly. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Now, a question came in here from Ravid, and he's asking, with this hype, or I guess focus on data literacy these days, do you think there's going to be a role for data literacy in the coming years? I have an opinion on this, but I'd love to hear yours first.
I mean, I absolutely think there'll be a role. I don't think I can't personally, and I used to work with someone at British Telecom, and his job title was futurist. So essentially he was paid to think about what might happen in the future. And I wasn't, and I was amazed at the kind of his thought processes and what he came up with. And I don't think I'm very good at that. However, I can't envisage not needing to be data literate, because the proliferation of data is I was going to say it's expanding exponentially. I don't know if it's exponential. It's growing very quickly. And again, here's my terrible anecdote, and I'm not making this number up. I did see it very recently, that I think 90%. Let's pick a number, a very big number. About 90% of all the data ever generated was generated in the last couple of years, because we're getting things like sensor data and IoT data. We record all the information, every tweet that's sent, every Facebook post. There's so much data. I don't think you can get away from it, and people will always be using those numbers to try and tell you, to try and justify a story they're telling you, to try and bring credibility to any message that's coming across. And I think it's always going to be important to question that and to understand where that data comes from and to be critical. And those elements I just can't see going away, even if the technical ability to interpret numbers, the software that we have is getting better and better at doing that. But the software, I just can't think is ever going to be able to tell me 100% is this data trustworthy. It'll get better, but that's a much further off.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going away. If anything, I think it's going to be much like actual literacy, right? Just being able to read. People will just know how to work with data as part of their regular everyday thing that they have to know, like math, right? Or reading. Now, let's shift the conversation a bit from the individual to an organization, right? So we were able to ask a person, we can say, hey, I'm data literate, or I think I'm on a scale of 1 through 5, I'm a 4 or something like that. But when it comes to working with an organization, which is essentially just a compilation of individuals, how can we tell where an organization is on that spectrum of their data literacy journey?
So I think there's maybe 2 points here. I don't think either of them are perfect ways of understanding this. I personally work with a number of organizations who survey their employees, I'd say fairly regularly, every 6 months or every year. And they ask employees to to self-assess their level of data literacy, and they ask some questions of different people, because I might ask a data scientist some slightly different questions than I don't know, than someone else in the organization to understand this. And what they're looking for are gaps in the levels of data literacy, and comparing that to their analytics strategy. So they've got roadmaps, they've got places they want to be with data, and they need to make sure that their people are keeping a pace or are slightly ahead of where that strategy is taking them. So they're asking in that way. The other way that I've seen people try and measure this is to try and measure things like accurate decisions that are taken. Now, I think that's a very valuable thing to do, but I think we then come into the sort of the correlation and causality piece. Just because somebody takes a lot of accurate decisions doesn't necessarily mean they're data literate, although I think it probably does. But you've got to be a little bit more careful with that one. But they're the sort of two approaches that I've seen to people, or two approaches I've seen organizations taking. But they're doing it for the same reason. They're doing it to be confident that their people are going to match their data aspirations.
Right. And then staying on this topic of organizations, let's say an organization realizes the need for data literacy and they really want to push for increasing their data literacy across their organization. Do you think it makes more sense to start this sort of from the top down, where the executives are kind of pushing this down, or do you think it's a more effective to go with bottoms up approach?
So I think, for me, the number one driver for data literacy is the culture within the organization. The culture within the organization has to be to build trust in our people, and trust that people can make good decisions, and be happy to delegate the authority to those people to let them take the decisions. Because within that framework, within that culture, that in itself, I think, encourages data literacy, because people then see the value of it. If I'm being asked to take decisions and I'm being given data which I can use to understand if the decisions I'm taking are working, then that will give people the impetus to ensure that their data literacy levels are at the correct level. I'm not saying that we don't need to help people. We can't just rely on everybody self-starting and picking these things up. But if you don't have the culture, I think it's a waste of time trying to push the data literacy piece. And I happen to think that the culture generally is best driven from the top down, because and this is something we've from Pyramid's perspective, we've spoken about a few times when we talked specifically about analytics culture and how to drive a successful culture in a business. I think people generally do respond well to seeing their peers or people just just one or two levels above them in an organization using data to make good decisions. People will copy that if they see that's a successful way of working, or if you see someone who's more senior to you doing it, quite often you think, well, like, maybe I should be doing that as well. So that's a good way to, without forcing things on people. I think it does need to come from a senior level and percolate down. That's not to say that in the middle or the bottom of the organization we can start to adapt the way that we train people and upskill people, but to me the driver is the culture, and the culture should come from the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking exactly on this topic of upskilling, right? There's a question here from Gahandira. He's asking, how can we quickly sharpen our data literacy skills? And the keyword here is quickly, Rob. Emphasizing on speed, because I feel that if we take too long gathering insight, it might be obsolete. So I guess let's talk about upskilling and sharpening personal data literacy skills, but also in an organization.
So I think, from my experience, and I work for a BI vendor, and it's kind of our responsibility. The people who work there, we have to upskill ourselves. We have to make sure that we are, we have a good level of data literacy. But we work with lots of companies who probably have this exact problem, and I think we've seen a number of approaches people have taken that have helped with upskilling and quickly upskilling. So a couple of things that I've seen that have been very successful. Having things like identifying BI champions, so people within somebody within a department who is already good, who already has good skills, who we identify, and we set, we formally or informally set aside some of their time to helping their peers. So if I'm in my department, I know who I can go to ask questions about how I manipulate data, and that person isn't going to harumph at me and go, I'm too busy, because part of their role they are being measured against, is being able to help people doing that. And the other thing that I think we've seen that's been very successful, in fact, definitely a big customer of Pyramids at the moment. A Swiss manufacturing company, and they've been rolling out Pyramid to, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 users who'd never used the product at all before, all different levels of data literacy, and they're embedding. Now, this happens to be Pyramid can do this. I wouldn't speak to another product because I don't know them well enough. Right. But for example, we can embed things like little viewlets, videos within parts of the application that, if I'm using it, are specific to the analysis that I'm carrying out. So if I'm in the finance department and doing something, I can access little 2-3 minute videos of how to do something, build a forecasting model specific on finance data. Now, Pyramid, we haven't built that. This is entirely our customers done this. We've provided the framework, and they've put the work in building these very specific examples to upskill people. So I think those are the, in terms of the technology. And then just one other point, I think, if I can make, which isn't specific to some specific skill, but it's around the communication piece. It's how do we get the people who work with analytics and the rest of the business, and I'm a little bit careful how I say that because everyone should be doing some data analysis, but how do we get them to work together and understand each other's language? And we've seen a couple of, again, experience from our customers, things like hackathons, which admittedly, before I came to Pyramid, I always saw hackathons as something that development teams did, software developers did. But we've seen it happen with BI people and business getting together, once every couple of months and coming up with a problem and working together for a day and just getting used to working with each other. I think that's helped people a lot. And the other thing I saw very recently an organization was doing was something they call data cafes. So this is maybe a slight, little bit different to the BI champions, but this is just having time set aside where experts in analytics within the organization just take an afternoon or over a lunch period, or a certain time, they are there for people just to come and ask questions of people, maybe to bring them a little bit of data, say, I'm working on this, how would you approach it? So these are all ways that can uplift people, but they do all have to be driven from, I think, within the organization. The organization has to realize the value of doing this, but those are all things that I think we've seen benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually learned about data cafes when I was reading Bernard Marr's book on data strategy. I forget exactly which company he used as a case study.
He was at Shell, I think, wasn't he? I think.
I'm not sure.
Maybe that wasn't what he used in his book, but okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one he actually used in the book, but they basically had a very effective, this is pre-COVID, where they had like an actual cafe where people can come with their laptops and ask any questions and kind of say, hey, how do I use Pyramid, for example, right? How do I create a bar chart, or how do I update my data? And it becomes so much more seamless and frictionless because you actually now have a person that you can go to and ask these questions. But I agree, it's very much culture driven as well, because if people don't know that they can ask these questions, they're not going to show up to the cafe to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's time to announce our first winner. What do you think, Rob? Should we take a short break since we're at the halfway point? We're going to announce one winner for the AirPods.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we've got 39 entries. So guys, you've got 10 seconds if you want to type in #Pyramid. If you don't win the first time, who knows, you might win towards the end of the session. So I'm going to go ahead and draw our very first winner for AirPods. This is always so exciting. And I still don't have a drum roll to go along with this, but. All right, Abdurrahman, congratulations. We're going to follow up with you. You have won a pair of AirPods from Pyramid Analytics. I'm going to go ahead and remove my screen for now. We're going to keep this party moving, but we'll definitely follow up with you after the session. So congratulations. For everyone else who's still, with us, #Pyramid is the way to go if you would like to enter the raffle. I think if you already typed it in once, you might not have to type it in again, but you can, to see if you get luckier if you type it in a couple of times. Oh yes, Paul. Paul said it was Walmart. I was thinking Walmart. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. So that example that Bernard mentioned was in fact Walmart. Okay. So at this point, I want to shift over to, I know we're talking about data literacy, but now I want to shift over to talking about how storytelling can actually help organizations along their data literacy journey. So Rob, I welcome all your thoughts on the topic. How can storytelling help?
So I think this is it's an interesting question, and I don't think this is maybe an obvious answer as we might all want. So I think a good, good data storytelling is about I think, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking this. I've probably stolen the wording from someone else, but it's stirring. It's emotional. It's stirring an emotion. It's a call to action. If I tell a good story in a business meeting, I want people to leave that meeting and immediately, still be thinking, I know what the key points are and I know what actions I want to take.
Yeah.
So actually, and storytelling is probably something that we've seen people use very successfully, maybe not for the best purposes. In the last couple of years, I could probably pick out various news stories from around the world that people use data and stories and really fire people up and get them to take actions that you might argue that if they really understood all the data, that maybe they wouldn't take those actions. And I'm not picking any sides here. I'm just thinking just in general. Now, what that says to me is that rather than that removing the any kind of requirements for data literacy, if anything, there are elements of that data literacy that I think I need to be stronger. Because if someone tells a great story, you can go away and almost forget that, oh, hold on, were those numbers that they used? I got to ask now where they came from, or how old they were, or how their interpretation of it, is that really right? That chart that they showed forgot to look at one of the axes. Now I can't remember, were we seeing these like wildly different variations in numbers, or they cut off the first 95% of the y-axis or something.
Right.
So actually, I think there can be some great aspects of data storytelling that will help people who haven't got such high levels of data literacy, but I definitely don't think they will help people who don't have critical thinking and who don't question the data and think about what they're being told. So I think in a way that side of it, I almost have to concentrate more on. But it is a good data story. Maybe if I really trust the person who's telling it and I can sit back a little bit more and listen to it, hopefully a good data story will help people who are not so used to interpreting data. Because the other aspect, as well as the kind of the call to action and the emotional side of storytelling, is the focus and the sort of the direction that the story goes in. So if we can effectively visualize data, if we can pull out the points of the data that are really important, and we haven't got any, we're not showing any product today or screenshots of things, but if people will have seen charts with I don't know, 20 different colored bars, and well, who knows what that's really trying to tell me. But if I see a chart where with like two colors in it, probably like the one color, the highlight color, it will immediately draw my eye to the particular aspect that I need to look at. But all of those, and we call these pre-attentive attributes, so things like color, shape, fonts, or sizes of words, where they're used on a chart. All of these things can make it easier for people to interact with data and understand what they're being told. But I think it's important that you know who's telling you the message. Because you can use storytelling to push people off the story as well. So used in conjunction with some critical thinking, I think it can be helpful. And within an organization, hopefully, when we're trying to help each other, it can be useful, and it can lower the barriers for understanding how to interpret particular data. But ultimately, all visuals that you're given is sometimes you'll get beautiful looking visualizations that for anybody are hard to look at. Yeah. I should be expecting to be given decluttered, fairly minimal visualizations if I'm looking to understand a story rather than a much wider picture where I may need a lot more analytics. So Unfortunately, I don't think I'd love to be able to say data storytelling is the answer for helping people with data literacy, but actually, I think the two need to play together.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything you just said. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of teaching people the visual best practices, kind of those pre-attentive attributes that can help you tell that story. And especially when you add that context or that, overlay it with how this data relates to your audience, all of that can really play together in that, first of all, making data not as intimidating, right? Because there are people out there that when they hear data analytics, they're just, no, I was never good at math. And they'll say something crazy like that. You're like, no, you get this. You look at your own data all the time. Like even your weather app shows you data. They show you the temperatures, the averages, and all of that. So I think it takes that fear factor out of it as well, and the ability to, like you pointed out, visually tell that story using color or any of those pre-attentive attributes that we can play around with can either help you tell a better story or a worse story, right? Depending on how good you are with using the visuals to your advantage. A question came in here from Ravit, and he's asking, what would you say are the 3 best skills that a data storyteller needs to have?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think, and maybe this depends where you come from, because of course people who tell stories are not always people with a data background. In fact, there's some great material out there for building narratives and for telling stories within a business context, but don't come with any kind of technical background to them. And the building the narrative and the finding what will resonate emotively with people, I personally find that the hardest piece, because my background is probably, and maybe the way I think, is more analytic, and that clearly is really critical to data storytelling. It wouldn't be a story without that aspect of it. So to me, that's the area that I've personally spent more time trying to read and understand. And I would say the good point is, people can codify that. You can write down the rules for how to do it. You may not find it as natural as people who are maybe more natural storytellers or wordsmiths, but you can learn it. But equally, the people who have got those skills can learn. Again, I think you can codify the ways of simplifying charts. There are lots of rules for doing it. That said, it's clearly something that people still need to be strongly involved in, because in terms of choosing which visuals tell the best story, I still don't see any tools that do that perfectly. There are tools that help, and we're getting better at doing that aspect. And I think probably that aspect we will have automated long before the storytelling gets automated. So maybe if you really wanted to be a good data storyteller going forward, I personally think more about the stories, because the visuals is going to get, I think, will get easier and easier to produce. And so tools like pyramid analytics, for example, but of course there are other tools that will help you build focus visualizations, help you to minimize the content that you're showing, to bring focus. But still almost nothing that I see that will do all that for you automatically. So I know you asked for 3 points, but I'd really stress the main point for me is the storytelling itself.
Yep. And it's interesting that you bring that up in terms of tools being able to put out, data visualizations. And I think the latest Gartner report, where they compare all these tools, one sentence that really stood out for me was they basically said, we're no longer rating how these BI tools can design visualizations, because for the most part, everyone's sort of along the same lines. Now they're looking at other aspects of, how do you take this further? So a follow-up question on the storyteller aspect, who in an organization should be considered a data storyteller? So we've established everyone in the world should be data literate. Who should be a data storyteller now?
I think anyone who wants somebody else to take some action needs to be able to tell a story with data. So that's still going to be a lot of people. So clearly there'll be some people that very obviously fits their role. So C-level people or managers, people who want to ask their people who work for them to do something, want to demonstrate why what we're doing is useful. But also that could be people. I could be the kind of in my hierarchy, in my division, I could be sitting at the bottom, and I just work for other people. But someone in my group, one of my peers, is absent. They're on sick leave, or they've left the company. And I really think we need to take someone else on. Well, I could use data and a story to demonstrate, perhaps. Well, look at the work that's stacking up. So whilst I'm not having to disseminate down the hierarchy, I still sometimes it's very useful for me to be able to explain to people who are senior to me. And therefore, in that respect, you could probably find anyone within an organization who sometimes needs to put their hand up and say, look, we need more help here, or we need some different machinery, or we need something configured differently. So again, I think you could argue that everybody should be considered to at least have those skills would be useful for them to have. Now, again, I think it's going to come down to the literacy piece, depending on who you are, depends on how advanced you need to be. But I think it's very useful just to understand that, to be able to tell a simple story and have a little bit of data to back it up, that's really powerful potentially for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone listening, become a data storyteller. End of story. End of story. Get it? We're telling stories as we go. So Rob, you mentioned critical thinking earlier in our conversation. So I want to bring up this question here from Kunal. And he's asking, is there a process for critical thinking in terms of data literacy? Or I guess, how does critical thinking play a role in data literacy?
I don't know. That's interesting, because I've not come across, and I talked just now about all these different things that there are rules for around storytelling. I must admit, I've never desperately looked for rules around critical thinking, maybe because I'm a bit annoying and I just ask people lots of questions. But if you wanted, I think really, if you want to encourage critical thinking, you just need to encourage curiosity. You want people to look everything they look at to be questioning and asking, explain to me why that happens. Why should I believe this? Where's the data come from? Has it been processed? What other data is out there? But constantly questioning. Not in you can be a little bit obstructive sometimes. There's an element that you still need to have some of your own data literacy to interpret the answers to those questions. A classic thing I see is people dismissing the results of surveys because, hey, it's a survey. They didn't ask me. How good could the survey be? Well, these are people who don't understand sampling. Well, okay. So, but therefore, we need to say to those. Some people have just been obstructive, but you need to be able to say to people, you need to educate yourself a little, or let me point you at some material that will educate you. But yeah, I just think it's just having a questioning mindset. I don't think that there's a set of rules so much for that. I do think it's cultural. Again, we should be absolutely accepting people and expecting people and encouraging people to put their hands up and say, hold on, I don't understand that, or I want to ask some more questions around this. And the worst thing is if someone does that in a meeting, or when we're trying to disseminate information, we should encourage that. We certainly shouldn't be dismissive of it, or think they're holding us up. And that to me is that culture will drive the critical thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liz agrees. She says that, the root of critical thinking is curiosity. So I guess having that culture of, yes, ask us questions and be curious and encouraging that is key here. All right, let's shift over to software, right? How does software play a role? And I know we talked a bit about it already, but how does software play a role in helping organizations on this journey of data literacy, data storytelling?
So, obviously it's fairly, I work for a BI platform software vendor.
Wait,
so
what? You do?
Yeah,
wow. Where do you work?
Strangely, I'm going to tell you that software is really, but software isn't the be all and end all, but sometimes, I think we hear people who will say, for example, in terms of realizing your data strategy, that culture is everything. No, culture is really important. Until you've got that in place, the software probably isn't the thing that's going to cause you a problem. But if you've defined your strategy and the culture is in place to support it, well, now you better make sure that you've got software that supports what you want to do. So as we discussed in terms of the storytelling, the software is getting better at picking the right visuals for you. However, you can still make a horrible mess of it. Because the software has to be extremely flexible, because it doesn't know what questions you're going to ask, what data you're going to put on it. Therefore, the more choices you've got, unfortunately, the more chance you've got of of cluttering things up. And again, that's something that you can teach people, and you can put hints into the software. If you've got a software framework that supports you within your organization or within the contextual area of your data helps people, I think that's really, really useful, because I say every different vertical is going to be different in that respect on the type of data they have and the way they present the data. I do think what's another point that's really useful in software, if you look for software and software frameworks that allow you to customize the UI that they give people who are interacting. So not just, obviously I might produce a different dashboard or a different report for people, but what about actually turning on and off functionality within an analytics tool? Day one, when I've never used an analytics tool before, I don't need the button that, I don't know, builds me a k-means cluster. I don't care. In fact, all it's doing is getting in the way and making it harder to find the other buttons. So having a framework that allows me to tailor to the end user what it is they see, I think is really useful, because it takes away people's worries and concerns about being overwhelmed with something that's new. And I can point, again, I can only sort of talk to my own experiences, but I can point to customers of Pyramid who've done exactly that. They've Pyramid enables that, but you still got to think about what it is you switch on and off and how you roll that out. Again, we've seen people give very simplified versions of the software to certain people in the organization, and then work out, well, once they're comfortable with that, or we're gonna give it a few weeks, and then we're going to give them some training before we start showing them some other aspects of the software. And many people in the organization will never see all of the functionality that's available, because they just won't need it. And that can certainly help the uptake of analytics. And the other thing that I think, again, I don't think we talk about it very much, and although I think we will talk about it more and more, is how we tell stories with data, and the software that we use to tell stories with data, where that data is moving. I think it's quite an established approach now, that when we talk about data storytelling, almost the product could be a PowerPoint slide. It's static. I come along to my meeting and I open my laptop and I show you my chart and I tell you my story, and we all go away and think, yeah, great, I know what I'm going to do next. Right. And that's great, and that's not going away. There's still going to be meetings. But what about the person who opens up their dashboard every morning or once a week and just sees a load of charts, and what order do they look at them in, and nothing's leaping out at me, what's important, what's not? So having software that can look for what's interesting, perhaps having software that can help tell me what's interesting in a chart, give me some insight, I think that's really useful. Having software that can alert me if something that's interesting to me changes. I don't want to waste my time traipsing through 50 charts looking for something that might be interesting to me. Allow me to set that up. And also, I think having software that allows me to share my insight with my peers. And that's something I think we've seen in the last 2 years, for fairly obvious reasons. People haven't been sitting in offices together, but some way that I know why something has happened in the data, for example, and I can annotate that data, and the data that I annotate is immediately shared with people. So the classic, and I show people this if we're showing them, again, it happens to be our product, but I might have some sales figures. All through the month of May, my sales were terrible. Now, my figures will tell me, I know they were terrible, but my figures don't tell me why they were terrible. Right. Well, if anyone on the call is in the UK, you will know that it didn't stop raining in May. And so if I'm an ice cream salesman, I probably didn't sell a lot of ice cream. Well, my data doesn't tell me that, but I could add that information in and share it with people. So that adds information and context and helps people understand the data. And I think that's all part of storytelling. But I think we're seeing more focus on the lessons that we can take from that, maybe storytelling 1.0 and moving to storytelling 2.0, which is taking those approaches and applying it to data that's in flight, and immediately tailoring the way that we're displaying data to end users.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that. I really love the idea of giving people access to a tool that might not have all the bells and whistles that actually might distract them more than help them, especially if they're very new. So is that something that Pyramid actually does, kind of give clients different is there versioning control that you can control what features people have?
Yeah, we can. I mean, Pyramid will allow you to say for each individual user, if you want to, which functions they can see. So we can be very granular and specific for what we're showing. But again, you know, as I say, Pyramid, without turning it into a sales pitch, but Pyramid is a kind of an analytic platform. There's a lot more to it than just the the BI side of things, and therefore it's very useful for us to be able to do that, because otherwise, the reality is, in a large organization, not everyone will use all of the functionality. So why clutter up their interface? Why not just make it as simple and as as easy as possible for them to get going and start producing insights?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that you have some interesting customer experiences. Do you have a customer story that you can share with the audience in terms of how they've used Pyramid to help with data storytelling, or any sort of fun use cases that you want to share from any of your clients?
I mean, we've got a number of customers who certainly used Pyramid to build data storytelling. I'm trying to think of now trying to tell you a story with something that's kind of compelling and easy at the end of it. I suppose the customer that I alluded to earlier on, who are a reference customer, so I can mention them, but ABB in Switzerland, who are a big manufacturing organization. So a lot of what they've done is empowering their users, making it very easy for them to access the data, to self-serve, to build their own stories up, because they've got this framework that has allowed them to embed very specific training into the product, that has allowed them to roll out these different user experiences. So they're a good role model for us in terms of how quickly an organization can go from a relatively in some areas a relatively low level of analytics usage to ramping that up very quickly. But that we should give full credit to them, because that's really absolutely their strategy and drive, and they've utilized the framework that Pyramid has given them to do that.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure you have a lot of use cases that maybe you can't easily share, right, because they're client stories, but it's just always interesting to hear about what people actually do with your product, because they can get creative and take it into different use cases for themselves.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I go to say, if people are interested, certainly there's a lot of use cases on our website, which won't all be related to data storytelling, of course, but a lot about the analytics successes that people have had.
Okay, perfect. Well, Rob, I know we're getting close to time, and I know we still have one pair of AirPods to give out, but before we go to our final giveaway, and guys, #Pyramid if you want to enter. I think we have over 62 entries so far. Any advice that you want to give to either people or organizations that maybe we didn't cover yet in terms of helping them on that journey of really becoming data literate, becoming data storytellers?
I'm trying to think of what we didn't already tell them. To me, I'd always just come back and say, make sure the culture is there that supports this. That's absolutely critical. Maybe the only other thing that we haven't talked about and we do talk to customers about is bringing in skills from the outside. So sometimes people will look and say, I'm going to start bringing in consultants, I'll use partners. I think that's of course that's fine. Certainly we see people do that around some of the data science or the more very specialist areas of analytics. I think the really important point is to make sure there's a hybrid approach here. So if you are doing that, always be looking to take the opportunity to use some of that partner time or that consultancy time to upskill people within the organization, because they're the people who are going to stay in the organization and help the organization grow. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and draw our winner. We've got 64 entries. I'm going to hit draw again. I really do need a drum roll thingy. But let's see. The winner of the second pair of AirPods is Fabio. Congratulations. We're going to follow up with you after the session. You won a pair of AirPods from Pyramid Analytics, so huge congratulations to you. I'm going to go ahead and remove my screen. Rob, as we wrap up, anywhere where can people go basically to continue this conversation or see those Pyramid use cases? What are your LinkedIn, Twitter, where can people find you? Okay, well, pyramidanalytics.com would be our website. If you Google specifically for data storytelling, and we did commission a report at the start of this year, which looked at the experiences of a number of large European organizations in terms of how they are using analytics and driving data storytelling. If you were to Google, I think, Pyramid Analytics Science of Data Storytelling, you'd find that report. I'm sure you must be able to find it on the website as well, but Science of Data Storytelling, Pyramid Analytics, you'll find that. And that's quite a comprehensive report with some more ideas. And then, outside of Pyramid as well, if you just, there's a huge amount of free information. Obviously, if you were to Google or look on YouTube at data storytelling, maybe I just quickly, the kind of 3-4 groups of people that I look for, that I kind of trust in these areas. There's a lady called Cowell Nussbaum-McNafflick. She used to work for Google. She has a lot of great information about building visuals to support storytelling and looking for that focus. There's Andy Cotgrave and Alberto Cairo. They're really good as well on talking to about how we build visualizations up. And we also have, and I wrote it down before I started because I can never remember his name, and if I can just find it, I will tell you. The other great book, the one about storytelling, and this is not data storytelling at all, but really good about the power of telling stories within a business. There's a book called Made to Stick.
Yes.
Yeah, do you know it? Right?
I love that book.
It is an excellent book. So Chip and Dan Heath, Made to Stick. Nothing about, no technology in it at all. Purely about the power of telling stories. It's not a huge book. It's very digestible, very easy to read. So I highly recommend that as well.
Perfect. And I would recommend all those 4 same people, by the way. I've spoken to all of them. They're all great people. And I'm guessing from Pyramid has shared that link for the science of data storytelling. So thanks for sharing that link. Rob, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the Dedicated show. And I will, I thank you to the audience who joined us. I always talk to my whole room as if they're here. They're out there somewhere. So thank you for sticking around. Congratulations to the AirPod winners. And thank you again for your time here today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Awesome. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Stay dedicated.